Welcome to everyone that's joining us to the GIS for Nonprofits webinar series. Today's webinar is about improving nonprofit planning and operations using GIS. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. The webinar will be recorded and sent to all registrants in the coming days. It will also be posted on the Esri website. There will be a Q&A session that we facilitate at the end of our presentation today. Please feel free to drop your questions in the chat throughout the session, and we will either respond in the chat or facilitate answering those during that live Q&A. With that, this webinar is the first in a three-part webinar series. The following two webinars will cover program measurement and impact, as well as advocacy and stakeholder engagement. Stay tuned for updates on our website when the days and times will be announced for those coming webinars. I'd like to introduce today's presenters. My name is Emily Swenson. I'm the manager for the Esri nonprofit program. I'm joined today by my colleagues Lisa Berry, who comes from the Living Atlas team, and Katherine Smyth, who's the lead solution engineer for the nonprofit team. Before we get started, for those that are new to Esri, I'd like to first cover what is GIS. At Esri, we like to talk about the power and science of where. Everything happens somewhere. Social, economic, and environmental factors uniquely connect by location. With GIS, you can integrate data from multiple sources through the common reference of geography. Data transformed into easily digestible information products to support operations, programs, and community outreach. This all provides a unified view of your data in a simple visual language that everyone can understand. Nonprofits of all sizes and across a wide range of focus areas, from social equity and environmental justice to arts and culture and youth services and beyond, use GIS and build vibrant global communities and ecosystems. Specifically, nonprofits use GIS to achieve greater operational efficiency and improve resource allocation, to measure and optimize their programs, and to advocate their cause and engage stakeholders. As mentioned, today's focus is on operational efficiency. So what exactly do we mean by operational efficiency? It means using GIS to accelerate strategic planning with a unified view of operations and resources by integrating multiple data sources into a common operating picture. It means gaining actionable insights into stakeholders' priorities and needs with demographic and lifestyle data. How to foster your understanding of the people and communities at the heart of your mission using data. This could include donors, volunteers, partners, or those that benefit from your work. Allocating resources where they're needed most. GIS integrates different kinds of information, for example, socioeconomic data to the data on the physical or built environment. With GIS, you can analyze that information to understand what's happening where and allocate programs, budget, staff, or other resources to areas where the need is greatest. And finally, integrating equity into planning and decision-making. GIS provides insight into patterns of inequality and a common understanding across communities to create positive change. Nonprofits use mapping and spatial analysis tools to identify where there are issues of racial inequity and to communicate the status and progress of their equity initiatives. We'll now turn it over to Lisa Berry, who's going to cover the Living Atlas of the world. Lisa, over to you.
Thanks, Emily. So first, we're going to start by talking about this collection of data called the ArcGIS Living Atlas of the World. This is the foremost collection of worldwide geographic content from Esri and the global GIS community. This community includes all types of organizations, from federal, state, and county governments, cities, environmental groups, universities, and private companies. Kickstart your GIS workflows by accessing spatial content from authoritative sources. Instead of the traditional methods of going to a website, downloading the data, processing it, and then starting your map-making process, Living Atlas allows you to simply add data directly into your maps or analyses and get started. It's very much a living atlas. Some of the data is even offered as a live feed, so you get real-time information about the world, such as traffic, weather, fires, hurricanes, and so much more. All of the content in Living Atlas is curated, authoritative, and continually updated, which is why we call it living. ArcGIS Living Atlas delivers immediate value across the entire ArcGIS system and is your foundation upon which you create your own maps and apps. It's built into the user experience anywhere you create a map. Wherever you add data into a project, you'll find Living Atlas. It's also accessible in places where you perform spatial analyses or share your work, such as products like Business Analyst, which Katherine is going to show later. The content in Living Atlas is categorized to help you narrow down your search for spatial content. Discover content for different mapping purposes. Base maps, which are the basis of every map. Imagery, which come from satellite images to help us capture what the Earth looks like right now and in the past. Boundaries, like county boundaries, census tracts, city boundaries, or other things to help you map and analyze your areas of interest. People, which helps you learn more about the population and housing around you or different socioeconomic factors. Infrastructure, to better understand things like transportation networks, utilities, or businesses in an area. Or finally, environment, to help us learn more about the natural world, like the elevation, geology, weather, or other natural phenomena around us. There are also subcategories to help you dive deeper into the available content and find what you need for your GIS workflows. Now let's go to a quick demo so that you can see a little bit more about Living Atlas. Right here we see the ArcGIS Living Atlas website. Now this is a great place to get started if you're new to Living Atlas. And as I said before, it is a living atlas, so you can come here to see what's new and what's been updated, like our most recent land cover, or what's new, such as our COVID trends for counties, which is updated every day with the most current trends for what's going on in our area. If you want to see the full collection of what's available in Living Atlas, you can simply browse the content, like I said, anywhere within the product where you make a map. Here we can see that there are a lot of different things here. And so what I like to do first is change my region. Because Living Atlas is global in nature, the first thing I like to do is change it to my area of interest, so the United States. I like to explore a lot of different options. As you see here, the categories that I mentioned earlier. Base maps are the core foundation of the map. This is what goes behind your data layers, and it helps create context for any map that you make. You may want to emphasize the roads in an area or go for a more cartographic approach. You may even want to highlight things like the terrain. There are a lot of different options for what to put behind your data layers. Let's go ahead and also go look over at the environment category to focus on the natural phenomena around us. As you can see, there's a lot of different content in here that helps you learn more about the world. Right now, we have lots of different live feeds such as active hurricanes or earthquakes, or even the most current wind and weather. If you're interested in learning more about where data set comes from because you don't know if you should trust it, simply choose the name of the person who's hosted this feature into Living Atlas. So this one in particular is coming from NOAA and their geo platform where they share scientific data to the GIS community. You may also just be interested in learning more about what is included in one of these items that you find in Living Atlas. So if you select the item, you can immediately start to learn more. For example, this USA current wildfires layer tells us the source, the update frequency, what areas are covered, and so much more. You can expect that when you open a Living Atlas layer or map, it will be documented so that you can have trust in what you're using in your GIS workflows. Let's explore a few other things in here. Let's go to the people category to learn more about the population around us. Immediately, we can see a lot of different things that may help us with our equity and nonprofit projects. For example, we may not want to know what the most current unemployment figures are in an area, and we get this data directly from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But Living Atlas contains a lot of different types of things. We also have the subcategories, as I mentioned before. Just in the people category alone, there's lots of different ways to stratify or find information that we are looking for. We can easily narrow this down. Maybe I'm interested in just exploring the housing in an area. Or if I want to see the vulnerable or at-risk populations, I can simply narrow it down to that search. Another way to narrow down your search so that you can find exactly what you need is to try the different content types. We have maps, layers, 3D scenes, and ready-to-use apps and story maps. Maps in their most fundamental form are pre-configured maps that you can simply save for your purposes. You can also customize these for your needs in order to accomplish the tasks that you need for your projects. You can also go to layers, which are more fundamental for GIS projects. You can do analyses on these, you can add them into your own maps or existing maps. Essentially, the sky is the limit. One collection of information that is in Living Atlas that is useful for socioeconomic exploration is American Community Survey data, or ACS. Let's explore one of these layers. This one is about poverty in the United States. The American Community Survey is a subset of, or is a branch of the US Census Bureau, and is a survey that happens between the decennial censuses every 10 years. These annual surveys, since they're only a sample of the population, are aggregated to 5-year estimates, and they are offered as different tables which help us learn more about the population. Like we saw before, this is well documented and it tells us more about where the data came from and what we can expect when we open this layer in a map. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's just open this in the map and see what there is for ACS and poverty from Living Atlas. Right away, we can see that there's state, county, and tracts available in this layer. We can also see that this is already pre-configured to show us the percent of population who are living in poverty. It's also showing us the national figure, so it's based on something that can help us give context for our stories that we need to tell for GIS. We zoom in, we can now see the pattern at the county level. And if we click on the map, we can learn even more by seeing the data stratified in a chart and narrow down for the topic that is being shown on the map. This is what I mean by ready-to-use content. This is more than just raw data in a table. This is data that's ready to be used, ready to be mapped for your purposes. It's also customizable. If I'm interested in mapping poverty in the Los Angeles area, I can simply zoom in and start customizing my maps. I can change the base map. These are all coming from Living Atlas. I may be interested in using one like the Human Geography, which shows road networks and other details over the data in order to give additional context. I can also customize a map or a layer from Living Atlas by simply changing what it's showing. So this map is showing us the population living in poverty, but my initiative may be more interested in focusing on the percent of children who are in poverty so that I can focus my efforts in that area. I can simply change the field that's being mapped, and the map will adjust the statistics and what is being shown for my needs. And now I have a new custom map for my purposes. I can simply save this and start sharing it with my communities to create action for my areas. Speaking of creating action, I'm now going to hand it over to my colleague, Katherine Smyth, who's going to show an example of how Living Atlas content can help address real-world spatial problems.
Thanks, Lisa. Using the ACS data that Lisa just showed, I'd like to explore a hypothetical scenario where a nonprofit would like to find the best location for an after-school program that provides kids under 18 with access to computers and the internet. What you see here is the result of the analysis we're about to perform. There are several metrics driven by the ACS data from the Living Atlas, just as Lisa showed earlier. These metrics can help us compare different locations that have been created using spatial analysis combined with that authoritative data. Let's dive in. I've created a project in an application called Business Analyst, which has several tools, including Living Atlas, that we can use out of the box to perform a site suitability analysis. I'll start with the area of interest for my nonprofit, which is the Los Angeles metro area. Here, I'm interested in seeing access to internet trends across the city. So I'm going to use the Smart Map search to help me get a better idea of where kids have access to internet and computers at home. With Smart Map search, I can choose up to 5 variables from US Census data to be related and shown on a map. I want to see where access to both computers at home and broadband are low. So I'm going to type internet into my search. Now I'm going to choose a few variables that will help me explore those categories. So here I can see the 2019 population under 18 in households that don't have a computer. And here I can see the 2019 households with no internet access. Now I'll set my variables to show census blocks where more than 10 homes have reported not having a computer for ages under 18. And I'll change this to percent to show the census blocks where 30% or more homes don't have access to internet. Now I can identify areas that may benefit from an after-school program. I'll zoom in further to define the area of interest. I also want to understand where schools are distributed in this area. So I'll use the facilities search to add them. Here I'll search schools and add that information. I have several filters I can choose from. I'll just refine this industry description. Hit next and make sure they're added to my map. Once schools are added, I can also select census blocks such as this one individually to view infographics by block area, create reports, and compare them to other block groups. Finally, using a suitability analysis, I'll define school sites that will benefit the most from this after-school program. I'll start with my features on the map and filter by the map extent. I'll also choose the walk time from each school and create those sites. Since we've already taken into account the internet accessibility of each of the census block locations, I'd like to look at a few other factors that are pertinent to my actual site locations here that may help me determine a best fit location. I can add variables from Living Atlas here, such as income indicators, showing which families may need more help because they're receiving SNAP, and also information about languages spoken at home. These variables will help me understand how I can resource these different locations in the best way possible for the surrounding area. I can change the weight of each variable added to my site selection. So I'm going to weigh income at 40%. Now these sites can be considered for an after-school program. So far, we've used Business Analyst to understand where access to internet is needed, and now we can use further information to understand how to move forward and make our results actionable. So next, I'd like to view this information in a dashboard. To do so, I'll select Share Results And I'll select dashboards. I'll select mini sites to show all the sites I have here, and a side layout so that I can compare later on. I want to keep all of the sites so that I can compare them to each other. And in this case, I'm going to select an infographic that I made specifically for this project. That's the Education Outreach Program Summary. I'll enter a title, and then a dashboard will be created, much like the one that we started out on. This dashboard enables me to see different statistics for each site individually. I can also compare the statistics for different walking distances by choosing each one of these or a side-by-side comparison. If I scroll down, I see more summary statistics and the language breakdown of the student population within walking distance. This information will help me resource my program correctly, and I can compare one to another in this way. Now I'll hand it back to Emily to show you how to get started with the nonprofit program so that you can start doing your own analyses such as these.
Thank you, Katherine. I'd now like to share with you information on how your nonprofit organization can get started and access the tools and other resources we've shared today that will allow you to bring operational efficiency using GIS to your work. Many of you may be familiar with the Esri Nonprofit Organization Program, which is Esri's commitment to connect nonprofits of all sizes with the GIS technology, training, and resources to advance their work. The nonprofit program provides special low pricing on most of Esri's ArcGIS offerings, including the tools that you saw today, which are ArcGIS Online and the Business Analyst web app tool. Included in these is access to the Living Atlas and all of the data that Lisa shared and more. Additionally, through the program, members can access other data and content, training resources, consulting services, the Esri community, and other products that we did not feature today. Here are some of the resources that will be dropped in the chat, the active links that you can check out. I highly encourage that you check out these items. First is the Esri Nonprofit Solutions site, an overview of the focus areas or ways that nonprofits use GIS, both meant to connect you to workflows and resources, as well as inspirational stories for what other nonprofits are doing. Next is the Nonprofit Organization Program. This is the program I just mentioned, where please apply today if you are a nonprofit who is not participating. The Living Atlas of the World. This is the resource that Lisa shared, the access to data through the ArcGIS platform. Esri Maps for Public Policy. Esri Maps for Public Policy is a site where Esri's team of demographers and analysts have compiled Living Atlas data into maps that you can use and access for your work already today. And finally, the Story Maps Gallery. Please view the Story Maps Gallery to see how nonprofits are sharing their work out as it relates to operational efficiency through the Story Maps medium. And make sure to connect with us. You can follow the link here to sign up for the Nonprofit and NGO e-brief, which is a regular brief that goes out to the nonprofit user community to highlight stories and opportunities, as well as advancements in the technology and workflows that our Esri teams are putting together to share with you all. Follow us on Twitter at Esri_nonprofit, and reach out via email if you or someone at your organization has questions about how to get access to technology that you saw showcased today, or inquire about access to anything else under the nonprofit program. That's nonprofit_inquiry at esri.com. With that, I would like to open the floor to questions. And I'll ask Jen, who's been moderating our chat, to bring forward any questions for the team of presenters.
Thank you, Emily. I do have a question here. Emily, this question is for you. And this person is new to GIS. And can you talk in more detail about just the concept of this integrated view you've been referring to, kind of combining social, economic, various types of data? Can you speak to that in more detail, please?
Absolutely. And I think this is very well reflected by the image that was shared on the earlier slide of a funnel and different bits of data falling into this funnel and then producing information products or maps that are actionable and allow you to make decisions. Now, the holistic view comes from bringing all of these data sources together and using location as the commonality, as the central framework for all of these other types of data. So whether that's data about your donors that's coming from a CRM, or demographic and lifestyle data about common characteristics in a community, or data about infrastructure or land use. Combining GIS allows you to combine all of these data types together to see what's going on where and what are the patterns between these different kinds of data.
Emily, I'm getting a follow-on question about the CRM. You mentioned CRM specifically. Can you speak in more detail around how CRM data and spatial data interrelate?
Absolutely. So a common workflow that nonprofits will follow is taking let's say it's a spreadsheet of donor data. So you know that these are individuals or families that support your mission. And you know where these individuals or families come from because you have an address. If you upload that data, bring that data into a GIS, and something almost magical happens when you turn those donors into points on the map. Your eye will already begin to pick up on patterns. Where are there clusters of donors, clusters of folks that support my cause? And what you can then do is perform analyses that say, okay, here's a cluster of donors that the software has allowed me to identify. What are the characteristics in the neighborhoods that these people live? And once you have found out, better understand what some of those characteristics are, whether that be the median income or age of these donors, or what kind of spending habits these communities that they live in tend to have. Do they donate to certain causes regularly? You can then take that demographic snapshot and seek out other areas where there may be people that fit that description. And that allows you to not only better understand your existing donors, but find out who your potential donors are and where they might be located to inform your outreach efforts.
Thank you, Emily. I have a question coming in for Lisa, and this is around additional data around my community. I'm looking at low-income community members and also the state of food insecurity. What types of data do you have available for that?
That's a really great question, and I can go ahead and share my screen if you give me just a moment. So there are a lot of different data sets in Living Atlas that can help with questions like these, and this may look familiar because this is where I left you guys off a moment ago, and you can immediately remember that concept I said about searching through the different categories and subcategories. However, you can also use the search box to your advantage. So if I was interested in grocery access, for example, there's a wide range of layers and content in here to help you with that. Someone on the policy team recently actually already went through and did an analysis of drive times and walk times to different grocery stores throughout the United States. And there are a lot of different maps that can help you explore that. For example, here we have an app, which was a different type of content that I hadn't shown you earlier. I'd shown you maps and layers. There's also apps, and this is actually a really interesting tool that anyone can use and open to explore concepts like food insecurity. So again, we have our description that describes what we can expect. If we view this application, we can start playing with the data and exploring our area. For example, you can immediately see this map is showing us where there are different grocery access, and we can see how far away people can walk or drive to these different locations. And you can search anywhere. So we are based in Redlands. I could zoom over there and immediately see which communities are perhaps underserved. So all of these gray people symbols, those may be underserved. They have to have a car in order to get there. Whereas these areas with the little walking symbol show us people who are able to walk to access grocery stores. So this is one example of a pre-configured app where we could start sharing this right away. The data is also available and it can be customized like I showed you earlier. Going back to the other topic you mentioned was income. There's a wide range of income data in Living Atlas, and I'll actually make sure I select all to make sure I'm getting everything. Esri Demographics offers year-to-year, most current year data about income. So we are in 2021, we have estimates from our Esri demographers. And so this is one option. We also have the ACS that I mentioned earlier. There's average income. There's a wide range of different content in here that can easily be used to explore poverty, income, and locate the communities in an area that may be underserved or at risk. And so I hope that helped answer the question, but essentially use this search bar to your advantage is super helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa. I have a question coming in for Katherine. And how do I get to business analyst in ArcGIS Online?
Sure, give me 1 second and I'll share my screen and start back at the beginning here a little bit. 1 second. All right, so right now you should be seeing my ArcGIS Online organization homepage. And, you know, we've done a lot of demonstrating different aspects of ArcGIS Online and things that you can do in it. Lisa, for example, showed that we have a web mapping viewer that you can use to visualize that ACS data from Living Atlas. And I showed Business Analyst. I just wanted to take us back one step and make sure that everyone is on the same page about how we got there. And what a great resource ArcGIS Online really is. So the first thing I'd like to point out is here I'm signed in with my own identity. So anything that I create inside of my organization will be saved to my name. Next, I can have any type of content here and store it to be shared either with myself, with my organization, or with the public. You can see here, these are, this is the dashboard that I created on the fly earlier in the demonstration that I did. So if I wanted to, I could open that just the same way that Lisa was showing that we can open the ACS data, and I can visualize that dashboard. If I wanted to, I could make it public and share it out. It looks like this is going to take a minute. So we'll go back here. I can also organize all of my content that we were looking at before here into different groups to make it more accessible to others in my organization. So say I had created that dashboard and I wanted to share it with executives only. I could create a group for those executives to navigate to every time they open ArcGIS Online, so they don't have to sort through all of the other content in the organization. Now, finally, the question was, how do I get to business analyst? ArcGIS Online supports several different licenses. So in this case, I'm licensed to have business analyst. And I can see the chiclet right here in my app launcher. And all I have to do to get started there is to choose business analyst, say, yes, I want to sign in. It'll log me in. And as soon as it does, it'll come up and present me with my project. If I want to start a new project, then I can always go back home and create a new one. So I hope that helps. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Catherine. I have a question coming in for Emily. You mentioned equity, integrating equity into planning and decision-making processes. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. And there are some additional resources that we can share in the chat here that Esri has been working on over the past several years to help organizations use GIS to advance equity in their work. Namely, there are data sets that are available through the Living Atlas and maps for public policy that can be used to better understand what the needs of communities are and how those needs may relate to underlying demographics, social, racial, otherwise, socioeconomic. It is through the use of this understanding that organizations can make decisions about how to more equitably allocate resources to those areas in need, as well as how to reach certain communities using mediums that are most accessible, so including language or better understanding what forms of transportation a certain community may use or may not have access to. So again, it's around using that data to better understand the landscape, and that is both the social and socioeconomic landscape, as well as using those tools to understand how to better reach people where they are at. Like I mentioned before, there's the GIS for Racial Equity Hub site that is dropped in the chat, and this provides an overview of not only the framework for applying GIS to questions of equity, as well as examples coming from the user community, including many nonprofit organizations who have been doing this work.
Thank you, Emily. Could you share your screen briefly for the Racial Equity Hub?
Give me just a moment. I need to pull that up. All right. What I'm sharing here is the landing screen for our GIS for racial equity work. This is going to provide an overview of how GIS is used to engage communities, map and analyze equity, operationalize racial equity, and manage performance. From this site, you can jump into the Racial Equity Hub. This hub is actually built on ArcGIS Hub, the Esri community engagement technology. And like I mentioned, within the hub, you can get access to data and inspiration, seeing all of the other sorts of applications that have been shared out by the Esri user community. So you can begin pulling into your work today. And I see that link has been dropped into the chat for everyone.
Thank you, Emily. We have an additional question for you again, Emily. Could you pull up that screen again with the various resources so that attendees can take a screenshot?
Yes, give me just a moment here. There you are. I hope everyone is seeing those resources. And as we mentioned before, the links have been dropped in the chat, so you don't have to try to memorize the lengthy ones. They'll also be sent out to all registrants following the presentation today.
Thank you, Emily. I don't see any additional questions coming in.
Well, with that, I will jump ahead to the thank you screen here and make sure that as a team, We thank you all for joining us on the first installment of our GIS for Nonprofits webinar series. I hope you gleaned something today, and we'll look forward to you connecting with us via the channels that we provided to hear about your work or understand how we can better help advance the work that you're doing with GIS. So with that, thank you and have a good rest of your day.